of the meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings, but I've had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so the meeting will be conducted in English only. Members, please can you refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raise hand icon when you indicate when you want to speak. Please remember to keep your microphones muted when you are not talking, and do not interrupt discussions until you have been notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. So, could we move on to our agenda? Agenda 1. Do we have welcome to members? Welcome to Jason and Dan for coming in this morning, and thank you for coming for 9:30 start. It's really appreciated. So, Geraint, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillors Benera and Seaborn.
Thanks, Geraint. Do we have any declarations of interest this morning? Yes.
Yes. Oh, sorry, you
Yeah,
go on. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I need to make a declaration of interest because I'm on a member of Foster Panel A.
And I'm on corporate parenting. Okay, thank you. Right, we're going to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on early on the 2nd of March. I wish to remind you that these are minutes of the meeting where we scrutinise the actions being taken to address the housing crisis. Do any of you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If you don't, I will take them as agreed. Everyone agreed? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We're now going to item 4 of the agenda, and I'll ask Rebecca to give us an update on the action sheet, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can draw members' attention to the action sheet, which is on page 19 of the agenda, you'll see that there are numerous actions that were raised at the last meeting when you looked at managing the housing crisis. The first action there, we're still awaiting the information for, so I'll get that to you as soon as possible. The second point is the feedback from the Housing Summit. Now, I did email that to you on Tuesday, so you've had that. You've had the next one, which is the responses to the recommendations from the last committee. With regards to the seminar, we are looking for a date to arrange that, so I will let you know as soon as that date's been arranged, and then I'm still waiting on the last 2. So as soon as I have that information, I will forward it on to members.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Beth. We now go on to agenda item 5, reducing Torfaen's looked after children's population. Before we start our discussions, I welcome Jason O'Brien, the Strategic Director for Children and Families, and Dan Jones, the Head of Children and Family Services, to the meeting. We've not met before, Dan, so we would like to introduce ourselves. I'm Councillor Dan Jones, representing Glenavon Ward. Lucy?
I'm Councillor Lucy Williams. I'm representing Athercombe Brown Ward.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Jane Watkins. I represent Fairwater.
I'm Councillor David Williams. I represent Llanrafan Ward.
And we've got Steve.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Steve Evans. I'm up at Cumbrawn Ward as well with Lucy. Yeah.
And Lucy.
Linda.
I'm
Councillor Linda Clarkson. I represent the Absecon Ward.
Okay. Thank you. Before we start our questions, we'd like to hand you up to both of you to give us a brief introduction to the report, and then we'll start our questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It will be I hope it will be a brief introduction, and I tend to waffle sometimes when I start. But yeah, just to give an overview of the report, there's I guess 3 key components within the report. One, looking at our children looked after population and how within Torfaen in recent years we've made, I think, some strident steps to reduce our looked after population. It's no secret that we've been and continue to be or have the highest children looked after population in Wales. I say that with a caveat sitting underneath it because we'll be awaiting the data from Stats Wales within the forthcoming months, so we can compare how we pitch against other local authorities going forward. But whilst we have been and possibly continue to be the highest, have the highest looked after population per 10,000 within Wales, we've made that some strident steps, like I say, within recent years to reduce that population. The year before last was the first time within 6 or 7 years that we'd actually seen our population, our looked after population, come down within the period of a 12-month, within the preceding 12-month period. And in previous years, our population had been rising by between 12 and 15% per annum. So really encouraging that, you know, those changes have been made, or changes in practice have been made, and we start to see that, you know, that shift of numbers of children within the population. Of course, it goes to say that, you know, within the decision making around our reduction of looked after children, that we still and will always continue to have a focus upon keeping children safe and making sure that we're making the right decisions in order to ensure, you know, the welfare and the safety of children. But as you will see, we reached a peak of 474 children within our looked after population, which was in October, November 2020. As it stands today, our looked after population sits at 380. So, you know, almost 100 reduction, and that's against, like I say, against the backdrop of a previously increasing looked after population. Lots of work has been done to implement lots of system change, lots of process change, lots of practice change. Members will be aware of the development of the Multi-Agency Support and Safeguarding Hub, the MASH, which was implemented some 3 years ago, or developed some 3 years ago. Within Torfaen, we've developed a threshold of need document and practice linking to our threshold of need to ensure consistency of decision making. That's quite a strong document, I would say. It's appended within the report. And just for some context, that document is currently being looked at on a regional basis across Gwent to see if its usage can be adopted, not just within Torfaen, but across the entire Gwent footprint, obviously acknowledging that we have a Gwent footprint within Gwent Police and a Gwent footprint within ABUHB as well. So to develop that consistency across the 5 local authority areas that sit within Gwent. So I think, you know, pleasing to know that that document is being looked at the very least for future usage and development. We've also developed within Torfaen a strength-based practice model. I think one of the things when I first came into post as Head of Children's Services, there was no real consistent model of practice. So, you know, unsurprisingly, lots of different decisions being made, some inconsistencies with decisions being made. So our strength-based model, which all staff are trained in, not just staff within social care, but that model has been developed outside of social care as well. So there's, again, consistency of practice and understanding. But all staff within children's services, within children's social care, are trained within that strength-based practice, which is an ongoing programme as well. You know, one of the things we don't do is just train and you know, and that's the end result. There's a constant development within that strength-based approach as well, and constant review and quality assurance. So that's just some of the work that's been done, and there's obviously a lot more that sits underneath that, which I'm sure will have been pulled up from your reading within the report, and you no doubt want to question. And then the other component within the report is around the development of residential provision within Torfaen, something that we've not done previously, but doing in acknowledgement of we do have a cohort of children with significant needs and complex needs, who for one reason or another can't live within a family environment for a period of time. Hence, there being a need, a cohort of children who do require residential provision. I think it's well versed and well cited, and in previous scrutinies and in council previous, I've alluded to or highlighted the fact we do have, profit-making organisations within the residential setting. The costs are staggering, the costs are eye-watering, and very often the outcomes don't correspond to the actual cost paid. So there's an element there, or there's two components to the development of the residential. First and foremost is around our corporate parenting responsibilities and ensuring, that we are fulfilling those corporate parenting responsibilities for those high-need, complex children, and that we are providing an in-house service, and a high-quality in-house service as it will be. And secondly, like I said, linked to the actual financial cost and financial outlay as well. This often staggering and eye-watering when it comes to residential provision. So that provision is currently in its, I say in its infancy. We've been developing it behind the scenes for probably the best part of 18 months. And we've still got probably the best part of another 12 plus months before it's actually operational, such are the complexities of setting up a residential provision. and, you know, it's making sure that we get that right. At the moment, we have 12 children, young people, who are in residential provision. As I guess a dip into the water, this residential establishment that we're looking to set up will be very small, a 2-bedded establishment. You know, we wouldn't want to get back to the dark old days of having massive residential establishments as well as once were within Gwent. So very small, but, you know, based upon meeting needs for children and young people within that establishment. And again, you know, I guess it's almost a dip in the water for us, or toe in the water for us within Torfaen in terms of an ongoing strategy and model, and, you know, developing that further as time goes on. So they're the key components within the report. I don't propose to go on in any great depth about anything else, and I don't know if there's any particular Dan wants to add. Obviously, if there isn't, that's fine. And then obviously hand over to yourselves for scrutiny.
Thanks. Just, you know, only to add really that coming in as a interim head of Children's Services, you know, following on from the great work that Jason has done, obviously it's interesting as someone from outside of Torfaen to come into Torfaen and now be able to understand, you know, some of the fabulous work that has been achieved over recent years to change around some of the cultures and approaches that have got us into the positions where our looked after numbers have been so high. And it's really interesting when you then sort of dissect some of those numbers and you realise that actually almost half of the percentage or numbers of children that are in care are actually those children that remained with their families. So whilst you know, and I can see, you know, there's some questions, there's some sort of in questions around that, but our looked after population of what Jason said, 380, actually nearly half of that is children who were placed on care orders with their parents or with kinship foster carers, so aunts, uncles, grannies, etc. So that's our, you know, actually that's where we differ from many other local authorities, and the work that we're looking to do going forward will be particularly addressing some of those, where those orders would no longer be necessary if children don't need to be looked after within their families. So I think there's, you know, welcome some questions around that, but that's been a really interesting feature of understanding the work that's needed. And I think, as Jason said, you know, there's clearly some short-term goals that we can achieve around those reductions, but then the long-term work is very much going to be centred around that strength-based practice and preventing the children coming into care and actually enabling those children who rightly need to be at home with their families to be able to stay there. So there's lots of fab work going on. A lot, you know, we're doing some sort of first in Wales stuff at the moment to make us, you know, really impressive as a council, and that others will hopefully then be asking us how we've achieved some of the improvements going forward, rather than us having to learn from others. I want us to be those that people come to learn from. So yeah, it's been a really interesting sort of 9 months, I think. Yeah, and so hopefully we can pick some of that up in the report and discussions today.
I think, thank you for both for your brief report. If you're okay, we'll now start our series of questions. And the first question comes from Councillor Linda Clarkson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that overview of the report. I think we've touched on some of the issues in my first question already, which we were looking at some of the reasons attributed to the increase in looked after children in Wales were sort of national issues, the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, that type of thing. And what we were wondering when we were reading through it is that what other factors may be relevant that makes that figure slightly higher in Wales and specifically higher in Torfaen. Things like deprivation, all of these things are sort of relevant with other local authorities as well. I think Dan's partially touched on that to say that a lot of those numbers are placed with parents, children. But are there any other insights within that, how long it's going to take for that to be addressed? Any other specific issues or risks that you can see?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think, as Dan pointed out, you know, there's short-term wins and short-term gains and short-term work that we're doing with this in terms of moving children out of the looked after population, safely out of the looked after population. But there's that longer term work around, you know, as Dana said, strength-based practice, system change, system overview, impact upon other agencies, and, you know, looking at how, you know, within counselling, within other scrutinies, we discussed the communities, the development of the Communities Directorate quite significantly, and looking at how communities, you know, deal with and resolve some of their the issues, and building up strength within communities, building up strength within families as well. So that's obviously a more longer term objective. In terms of some of the rationale for why, you know, why Torfaen has a higher looked after population. I mean, every or the vast majority of local authorities have seen populations increase over the years. You know, there have been some anomalies where some have seen decreases, but the vast majority of local authorities have seen increases. That's married against, like I say, I think, you know, cost of living, COVID, different levels of deprivation. But again, you know, every local authority will have levels of deprivation they'll be combating. I think that practice has been impacted previously. Like I say, we didn't have a consistent model that we were operating within Torfaen. We didn't have a consistent threshold. So, you know, no surprises in many senses. You know, there were different levels of practice existing within Torfaen. So that, you know, we developed that consistency. So I think that's been a key factor for us in that change in practice. We have been impacted on by the courts. We have a particularly strong court within Gwent, where I think some of the practice within the court almost forced us to change practice some years ago, where not inappropriate so, but where, you know, where we would be taking cases through court that we could have been dealing with in a different guise, I think. And, you know, we've done our best to erode or to support a different practice. That means, you know, we can support families differently. I think what's encouraging within the report that you have before you, that practice and that change in practice has been acknowledged through our recent CIW inspection visit. You know, we've put a very positive statement within the report that we pulled out from the inspection, and that inspection was generally, you know, positive throughout, and they could see the change in practice that had been implemented within Torfaen. Just so I'm aware, I'm probably not answering your questions in any sequence here, Councillor, but then in terms of I guess the easy wins or the target for us at the moment in the short term, Stan said, we've got 86 children who are currently placed with parents who are, there's an anomaly there, isn't there? They're in care, but they're living with their parents. So we need to make a call, you know, that they're either safe to be living with their parents and they don't need to be in care, or they're not, we need to do something different. So there's 86 children there who, for want of a better description, or 86 families, you know, we're targeting to make sure that we can move those out of care. And then, as Dana said, we've got a number of children. We've got 105 children as it stands at the moment who are placed in kinship care, so placed with relatives and grandparents and family members. And again, looking at our work going forward is looking at how we can change their status so they become special guardianship orders rather than care orders. So there's a couple of strands to the work going forward, really. There's that longer-term impact, or the longer-term work, and the short-term. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor?
On top of the other information, I think it more or less does. This is very much work in progress, and we're seeing early results, and hopefully those results are going to increase over the next hopefully couple of years. Is that right, Jason? Do you think?
Absolutely, yes. And it's work in progress, but it's a work that will never stop. As
of
well,
course,
you know, that's a crucial bit.
But it's the right direction now. It's this new way of working.
Exactly, and you know, the figures are telling us that. You know, our external regulators through CIW are telling us that as well. So,
no, that's good. Thank you very much.
Anything to say, Dan?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Only to echo what Jason said, I think that's a really helpful description of the journey. And I think what's again interesting for Torvine is the community itself doesn't necessarily change. People don't transition a lot into or out of Torvine. So what we have to do as a council and children's services, I think, is we have to adapt in the way that we support the community, because the community will largely have to respond to the challenges around cost of living, etc., in the way it does. And what we have to apply is that strength-based approach to try to, to get back to a position where social work is seen as a supportive approach to families, rather than a punitive approach where something happens, something goes wrong, and then we remove children. And I think that strength-based approach, what Jason's talked about, will hopefully see those numbers then reduce without any misgivings that we would then enter into risk-taking around, children being unsafe at home. Absolutely, that will be the priority for us, as it always will be. But it is about looking at those circumstances where people mess up, because it happens in most people's lives, doesn't it? Where people make a mistake. But that doesn't mean they should lose their children as a result of that. It should be that we're putting those, scaffolding those families really effectively to enable them to keep their children safely at home.
Could I just to add, sorry, Chair, there. Obviously, we've touched a great deal on the operational stuff that's going on within children's services. There's a strong strategic overview here as well, and members will be aware of the changes in directorates within the council, and with myself now sitting over a children and family service directorate rather than previously having sat over a social care directorate. So as to ensure that join up for children right the way through the system, so that we've got that consistent practice and that strategic overview. I mentioned communities as well, and the strength of that strategic overview, or strategic development within the community sector as well, to enable families to operate and to work safely themselves as well.
Our next question comes from Councillor David Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you've alluded to this already. It's going to be difficult. I'm looking here for the mic and I'm looking across to you, so please forgive me if I'm looking away. You've alluded to the fact that sort of about half, 189 of the children are with family members and parents, and we noted at section 3.3 it's been highlighted as an unnecessary use of care orders by the President of the Family Division and Public Law Working Group. So we wanted to know, is this a particular problem for Torvine? And how is this being addressed? Is there a way forward out of this?
Just looking at each other to see who wants to get in there first, because we both probably got the answers to some of these questions. But thank you, Councillor. Yes, as you say, 3.3. I mean, what's really, in terms of answers to this, it is a national, it is a UK-wide challenge, isn't it? We all recognise, but what's been really interesting is that the public law working groups that have been set up have clearly recognised this by the President, Andrew McFarlane. And that work continues through our local family justice boards to introduce ongoing strength-based approaches. And it expands then, not just because, as Jason was describing, this isn't just solely, a social care, a social work response. This is our courts, this is our guardians, our CAFCAS colleagues, the assessors, our solicitors, all have been driven in a particular way in which the courts have been, the forefront of decision-making for children. So I think what's really helpful, and I hope this kind of answers some of your questions, but Torvine sits on the public law working group. There's a meeting actually, I think it's next week, again, where it's a multi-agency approach led by the highest of the high in the UK to be able to try to find the solutions. And that is things like, we shouldn't be using the courts unnecessarily. That's why we should be using our public law outline process, which we've just been inspected on and found favourably to be using. And that courts shouldn't be concluding with care orders at home. So the use of supervision orders, which were used quite a lot in previous years, are now seen to be considered to be used again and promoted. or indeed no order at the end of a care proceedings if it's safe and approved that children should remain with their families. So all of those approaches, driven through the courts, has been really helpful for us because it's given us something to hang our coats on, if you like. We've been sort of wanting to go down this route for some time, but we've been hindered by the courts processes itself. So now having the president of the courts to say that and push this agenda is helpful because it's pushing back onto our judges, and as Jason said, our particular judge in Gwent, the lead, has been pretty clear on her expectations that children should conclude proceedings with care orders, and that isn't the case in other court arenas across Wales and indeed the UK.
Question 3 has already been answered, so we'll go on to question 4, which is one of mine, and it relates to paragraph 3.5, pre-proceeding work. What type of intervention would be used in pre-proceeding work?
The answer is endless in many senses. I think because what we will do with every family, every child we work with, is assess their need, assess the strengths, assess the areas where there may be some deficits. So any work and any intervention we do with a family will be based very much on need and assess need. We have a range of different services within the local authority. Our family focus service, our rapid response service, that will go and work with families based upon, again, levels of need. We work with families where there are substance misuse issues. We may work with colleagues in GDAS, looking at specific interventions for parents where there may be substance misuse issues. Where there are issues with domestic violence, we work with our colleagues within the probation service. And of course, we work with our colleagues within health, where there are, any mental health issues, any emotional well-being issues that meet their threshold, where there's CAMHS intervention needed and required. And of course, we'll use and draw upon the skills of our own social work staff. And, they want work with families. I think key to anything we do with families at whatever level, within pre-proceedings, post-proceedings, during proceedings, at conclusion, is our relationship that we build with families, and that's crucial and underpins any piece of work we do. Will be the building up of that relationship with families and children, so that we're able to implement any intervention that's required. So a very broad range of interventions as well. Some of those interventions will focus upon the family as a whole. Some of them will focus upon parents. Some of them will focus upon the child and young person as well. And like I say, very much dependent upon that assessment of need and what we conclude as a result of that assessment of need. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Daniel?
I think if you're happy with that, really comprehensive answer, I suppose the only thing I'd say is, where we do find challenge to support families, to enable them to stay together, are some of those agencies that Jason's picked up upon, where parents might have unmet needs that can't be resolved directly by a social worker, and often social workers are then seen as though the one responsible to wag a stick at the family and say, go and sort this out, go and get to your GP and sort your mental health out, or substance misuse. And actually, if they can't access those services, then that puts considerable pressure on us then to be in a position where we could be having to bring a child into care, couldn't we? And we see that a lot. So those are, when we're talking about this as a really multi-agency, safeguarding is everyone's business, it's really key for us to be able to sort of challenge around some of those areas of where those people suffer those deficits. And I think that goes back to the original question, why do some children come into care? There's often, the best part of work that can be done by social care can't achieve those results alone. It needs those other agencies to support.
I guess crucial is a multi-agency response. I missed it when I was going through, I guess, the agencies there, education, schools, working with schools as well. And there's that, that crucial response to that multi-agency response.
Thank you both for a very full answer. We come on to question 5, which is Councillor Steve Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Torfaen is able to offer 84% of its CLA. who require a foster placement. An in-house carer, which is significantly higher than a number of other local authorities, with a 73% national average in Wales, and that's of December 2022. While it's positive we can offer 84% of our CLA an in-house carer, are we still striving to improve this further? And how do we monitor these placements to ensure their success?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, that figure, the 84% figure is, I think, is exceptional. And always has been high with us within Torfaen. I think it's testament to the service we provide to our foster carers, and testament to the strength of our family placement team, testament to the support that our individual social workers provide to families, you know, our children's social workers as well. And it's pleasing. We continue to look to drive that figure up. I think when I looked at this yesterday, our actual figure yesterday was 85.6%. Of in-house carers, so it fluctuates, but fluctuates in a small sense, but it seems to be fluctuating in that it's going higher, and we're improving. The numbers, of course, then, the actual numbers are very low, and I think, yes, I was looking as well, we've got 12 or 14 children who are placed within IFA placements, independent fostering agency placements, so, a low actual figure as well as as well as a low percentage. We invested significantly within our family placement team 18 months, 2 years ago, in order to drive that figure up. So investment there is, as we've increased our staffing levels within our family placement team, so as to ensure that we're providing that greater level of support to foster carers, and also to ensure that our campaign to recruit foster carers is pretty hot as well. And, we're responsive to foster carers, or responsive to queries for individuals who come through the door querying about foster care. So that investment within our family placement team continues to focus upon driving that figure up. So that I think within the county plan, there's a target within the county plan. Off the top of my head, I should know what it is, but it's in the region of 90%. There's an acknowledgement that we will always have some level of dependency, I think, on the independent market, because, children's needs are such that sometimes we won't be able to, wholly meet their needs in-house. But, our target, again, it's certainly within the county plan, but sits within that 90% region, and hence that investment within the family placement team.
Question 6 comes from Councillor Alfie Best.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I didn't come in earlier. I completely forgot about the new start time. My question is relevant to 4.2 in the report, and it's concerning threshold of need. How often is the threshold of need reviewed, and by who? And alongside the document, what support is offered to ensure professionals and practitioners access the right services and understand the correct threshold of need?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, in terms of how often the threshold of need is reviewed, we have had up until recently, and are interviewing tomorrow for a consultant practitioner, a post within the service, and that post focuses upon the development of the strength-based practice, the constant review of the threshold of need, and quality assurance across the service. So I would say that threshold of need on an informal basis is pretty much reviewed every week. That's not a clear answer, I know, but in terms of the review of it, so like I say, it was developed in 2020. It's currently being reviewed, as I mentioned at the start, it's currently being reviewed in line with the regional work that's taking place, to look at how we adopt a regional threshold of need. So being reviewed regionally, for me, the document is very fit for purpose, I would say, and has there's clear understanding in there. There are clear thresholds, there's clear levels of decision making, there's clear levels of when services should and shouldn't be activated. So the quick answer is it's currently being reviewed within that regional work that's taking place. In terms of, sorry, Councillor, I think the second part of your question was around how we know it's used consistently. Was it? Yeah. So in used consistently within the organisation, within social care, because of the constant review we do with staff, that constant development of strength-based practice, that use of the consultant practitioner, so we know that it's used consistently. You know, there are some judgments that within there's a human factor to any threshold, isn't there? So there are some judgments that individuals will make, you know, which can be different, can differ as well based upon our own individual experiences. But it's used consistently because of that usage of our consultant practitioner, or what was our consultant practitioner and will be going forward, but also through as part of new social work inductions, threshold of needs is understood. Like I say, that strength-based practice is understood. And within teams as well, you know, team managers have a responsibility, group managers have a responsibility, Dan has a responsibility, I have a responsibility as well to make sure that it's used consistently.
Okay,
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Question 7 comes from Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Staying with 4.2 and looking at the issues around no further actions. It says in the report, the challenges continue that 67% of referrals result in no further action, and that was of January 23, which remains too high and more work with partners is needed to reduce this significantly. So the question is basically, have we identified sort of the barriers to partners on how they're making their referrals? Have we identified any common themes? And how are we going to be working with partners to ensure that figure comes down?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, a couple of strands there. First, you know, in terms of our partners, our key referring agencies within our partnerships are health, education, and the police. Our key, three key referrers there. Within education, we've within Torfaen, we've set up an online referral pathway, so that at least, you know, within the confines of Torfaen, our colleagues within education will refer via this online referral pathway. This online referral pathway will take them through a series of questions so that they are able to determine, am I going down the right course here? Am I going down the right pathway in terms of referral? And does this warrant referral into social care? Or can I veer off somewhere else? And, you know, should I be, you know, by way of example, should I be contacting a drug agency? Should I be looking at contacting the GP instead? So trying to ensure that, you know, that in-house within Torfaen, there's a right pathway so people are able to follow their way and navigate their way through that. There's sort of red flags within that process as well, so that at no point, if there is a safeguarding issue, at no point is there a pathway out of that online referral path. So if there's a safeguarding issue, it comes in. You know, we're certainly not in the business of pushing away any safeguarding issues. It's around making sure that if there's universal support or more basic level of support that can be sourced elsewhere, that the schools are, you know, pretty much having those discussions and considerations for themselves. So that's one strand of it. The other strand, a great deal of our NFA referrals come through from Gwent Police. Via their PNM process, their notification process that comes through to us, and yes, there's a significant number of referrals that come through there. That causes us a problem. It also causes Gwent Police a problem, you know, in terms of resource and in terms of inappropriate referrals coming through. I've met with the local chief super, I think she's a chief super, she's either chief super or superintendent, to look at what's going on there and to look at what's coming through inappropriately. That's what has led to that regional piece of work that I mentioned earlier taking place, looking at thresholds of need and looking at processes and practices. Because, you know, I guess if you've got you need that consistency across that Gwent region, that Gwent police footprint, so that if you've got an officer who's dealing with a child in Caerphilly or dealing with a child in Cwmbran, they know that there's a consistency of practice, a consistency of referral, and a consistency of response. So, you know, that's a significant piece of work that's being led now at our instigation, but being led through the Regional Safeguarding Board. And I'm hopeful that that's going to yield some positive results in terms of that NFA. You know, a 67% handoff rate really for NFAs is totally inappropriate, you know, in terms of the resource levels, that, you know, the level of resource it takes to deal with that. But in terms of, you know, families coming through our door as well, you know, and it is so key then, crucially, is that work we're doing with Gwent Police Councillor.
That's great. Thank you very much for that answer.
Okay. Thanks, Linda. Comes from me. It's regarding paragraph 4.3, strength-based practice. Training is being developed and there is a proposal to deliver this to the wider agencies to enable consistency and understanding of strength-based practice. We are currently, where are you currently, you know, with plans to deliver this? I think you've more or less answered that anyway.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Again, I think, you know, there's a theme that runs through this, isn't there, around that, the ability for us to enable other agencies to understand that this is all, you know, that child protection is everyone's responsibility, and and what Jason goes back to, in that there hasn't previously been a consistency around the model that we've tried to use across Torvine. So some local authorities have used signs of safety, some local authorities have used strength-based, relationship-based practice. There's lots of different models, but what we've tried to do is encompass all of those good models that exist, and this is certainly something that Welsh Government have been looking at recently, about what should a quality of practice model look like, and the outcomes of that was very much strength-based is the one that is one of the best to use, and ultimately it means that we should be supporting families, enabling them to, you know, stay together. So I think it's really key that, you know, we push down that work, and at this time we've trained our own staff. Our plan now in this year, 23-24, will be to extend that out to partner agencies, particularly schools, as education now sits under us. So that's a quick win, quick opportunity for us to be able to expand that across the education draft. But then enter into, you know, some really interesting multi-agency training sessions with health and police, where social workers, health colleagues, police officers all sit in a room together and discuss some case studies and say, how should we respond to that? And we could involve council members for some of that, if there's some interest in learning for people, if people would be keen to do that. Because I know, you know, when we talk about numbers, we're actually talking about children's lives, and sometimes we get away from that. And actually, if we're thinking about, you know, this is the reason why this child came into care, was it the right reason? We can all learn from that. And involving, you know, yourselves in those processes, you know, they're really helpful, and for people to have a little bit more of an understanding of some of the challenges that social care face. But, you know, you're in the context of where there are serious case reviews happening across Wales, and there is significant pressure on agencies, going back to sort of the question previously about, you know, the numbers of referrals. We see a spike in referrals because professionals are anxious. If they haven't referred something in, then, you know, they're going to carry the responsibility for something harmful happening to a child. And we understand that, we completely get that, but we need to help and support those partner agencies around the quality assurance of what they are referring in, so their safeguarding leads take responsibility for ensuring the right stuff's coming through our front door. But so, again, you know, they'll be our key areas to focus on in terms of the strength-based work, training the safeguarding leads initially, and then wider expanding that out to the workforces. So yeah, absolutely right, from other agencies and obviously the community-based stuff within the supporting those children not to come to children's services in the first place.
Crucial, Chair. Obviously, we've mentioned the appointment, or the forthcoming appointment of the recruitment process for a consultant practitioner. That would be a key function for them to ensure that, you know, there's that consistency of understanding within the borough, not just within social care. What I would add as well is, when we first implemented the strength-based practice model, we did target key agencies. So there was initial training provided across health, education, police, which was well attended as well. So it's time to review that and make sure that, you know, we're hitting all the marks there. That training or that strength-based practice also extended within the council as well, to the leadership team as existed at that point in time as well. So, because it's not just about just social care having a strength-based practice and an understanding, it's everybody having that understanding as well. But that consultant practitioner will be crucial within that development.
Jason, anybody else want to come in before we move? Lucy, your question 9, please.
You've answered an awful lot of because I think these next few questions are definitely around strength-based practice. So you've answered quite a lot. So I guess this is a bit of an extension, really. First of all, just to clarify, this model then presumably is being looked at Gwent-wide, just to check if that's the case. And also, is there a particular monitoring model? Because this is quite a new way of practicing. Is there a monitoring model being developed to make sure that it's the right one and that social workers are getting the right support? I guess that's the little bit I wanted to ask about.
In terms of the first part, it's not the strength-based practice that's actually being developed across the region. It's the threshold of need. And I know they almost come hand in hand to a certain extent, but it's that threshold of need that's being developed. And each local authority will have their own means of practice to a certain extent. Obviously, we want that consistency, not just within Torfaen. We want it across Gwent. We want it across Wales. We want it across the UK in terms, of that consistency of practice. But it's the threshold of need, just to make that I guess clear. It's the threshold of need that's currently being reviewed and looked at. In terms of the monitoring, again, this is where our previous practitioner was crucial in terms of monitoring the practice and the progress of the strength-based model. And this is where that, the incoming person will be crucial in reviewing and monitoring that as well. I think what is important to emphasise is, to a certain extent, the strength-based practice model isn't an off-the-shelf book of that's how you practice in a strength-based way. And it will always and continually be evolving, depending upon, I guess, what's going on in the outside world, and some of the, more recent tragic cases will impact upon practice. Some of the tragic cases externally will impact upon practice. So yes, there's constant work in motion, really. Crucial to it as well within the strength-based practice there's obviously a strength-based focus, but there's an understanding of risk and risk management as well. And that's crucial to the ongoing development of that strength-based model as well. So whilst practice has changed, that strength-based model and that strength-based practice should mean that practice will always change, or will always develop rather than will always change. Will develop in line with, any changes to legislation, any changes to, as a result, like I say, of anything significant happening in the outside world. But the monitoring, coming back, the monitoring element of it will be underpinned or will be unpicked now within that new function, that new role. Linking in then to quality assurance. So within that quality assurance model that we have and will, again, is constantly in development. It's about ensuring we have quality of practice. It's about reviewing our quality of practice. It's about reviewing outcomes for children and young people.
This is just just referring to one of the suggestions that you made with training with partners. I think and you mentioned that it may be possible and appropriate for elected members to be part of that. I think that could be really useful. I can think of a couple of residents who would be in that complex needs thing. It would be really good because it's much better to understand things when you're relating it to actual situations. So, I certainly would be very keen to take up that sort of offer when it's appropriate. That's all.
I would say at the very least what we could look to do would be a member seminar looking at the underpinning principles of strength-based practice and risk management. Because the model in itself, like I say, there's specific training around the model, but the model is and that staff development with that model is continual. So I would suggest we would start off perhaps with a member seminar, look at the principles underpinning it, and then extend that further.
You partly answered the next question, But as you say, Torfaen are creating the first post in Wales to be supported and partially funded by Social Care Wales. Is this a long or fixed term post? If long term, how long will grant funding be maintained?
Thank you, Councillor. The conversations with Social Care Wales have been going on for a long time now about how do you include research and evidence within the day-to-day practice of social workers. How do social workers use that knowledge from research to inform the way that they work? So they've been very keen to find and identify some way of achieving that. I've been in talks with them for a number of years to look at this, and it hasn't moved on. But so when I was in conversation with them about, look, we've got this post that I'm trying to develop, which is going to be building on some of the great work that was already in place, that was the quality assurance, the strength-based practice, but actually training as well for staff, and how the three are linked up to improve outcomes for families. They're really keen on that. So whilst they've agreed to provide us with some funding this year, they're totally committed to the role, but this role isn't subject to that grant funding, enabling that role to continue, because it's from core funding. I wouldn't say it's tokenistic from them, because it's very welcomed for them to support us, both financially, but on a belief of what we're trying to achieve. So there's no risk, in short answer. There's no risk to this post going. You know, it's totally supported by Jason, and what we've done has been increase the grade of that post to increase its seniority from what was an assistant team manager to a team management post. So we've now been able to demonstrate, you know, actually as a critical friend when talking to other managers, you know, to challenge practice and also make sure things are done appropriately and the work's, you know, of a high quality. It's the post itself is, you know, is recognised at that level. So I think that's, you know, it's been a really positive development for us in Torfaen. Again, as I say, it's a first in Wales post for us. So, you know, I'm sure we can be sort of coming back to you here in the future and telling you more about how that work's gone and developed.
Good news. Jason, do you want anything to add?
No, I was just going to say it is a permanent post. There's that very welcome contribution from Social Care Wales. I think it evidences really good partnership working and really highlights the purpose of that post as well in terms of development and you know, staff development and in terms of that practice model.
Jane, can I ask you to take question 11, please?
Thank you. So moving on to paragraph 4.5. It states there, to further support the workforce, Torfaen Council has set a target of 20 cases per social worker from April 2023. So we were wondering, what does this figure represent? How much of a reduction for some social workers? And also, you state that this is an ambitious target. So how realistic is achieving this number within the current workforce?
In terms of how realistic it is, as we've seen our looked after population reduce, you know, there's still a high level of demand. There's always going to be a level of demand, but it's about how we manage that demand. And as I said earlier, making sure that, you know, that we aren't working with, we're working with the right families and providing the right level of support. So yeah, whilst it's an ambitious target, it's a target we're clearly moving towards, and we have seen a significant reduction of caseloads within the service areas, within the staffing areas. You know, there are some staff who do have more than the 20, obviously, as that figure alludes to. But you know, we're targeting some of that staff group, or targeting those cases to continue to reduce. It's a little bit like comparing apples and pears sometimes, I think, when you look at a caseload, because you could have a caseload of 5 or 6 families with a significant level of complexity that corresponds to more than a caseload of 20 in a sort of work sense. So it's a little bit of a, I guess, whilst it's a target figure, there's sort of a context that sits underneath it as well. But yeah, we are working towards that. We have seen a reduction in recent years that corresponds to our looked after children population reduction as well. Does that answer the question, Councillor?
Yeah, I think it sort of broadly does. Are you, and you might not have the figures, but are you able to say, is there an average of how many cases? Because it's just under half the social workers that still have more, or when the report was done, still have more. So are you able to say what the figures are, how far off 20 they are?
I'll be Jason's assistant here. Hand that over. Jason's just going to look there. What's helpful is we get a report every week sent to us on the caseloads, so we're constantly able to review the numbers at which social workers are experiencing their caseloads. So whilst we're saying, and it's in particular teams where you'd see, so some of the teams that are more, I'd say more stable, then you would see more stable caseloads where the cases where the locality teams, where the cases are constantly, moving through, then those are the areas where you would see children's social work caseloads going up and down more frequently.
Just to give an actual figure, so in terms of variation, looking at this, our highest individual caseload or highest caseload for an individual at the moment is 30. Again, there's a context underneath that figure of 30 in terms of complexity, and I couldn't outline what the complexity of that caseload is. But then we'll have other staff on lower levels of caseload, so for example, 10, 14, and there's always, we're never going to get everybody on 20 as well. And one of the things that we need to be careful of within this as well, and within that figure, is ensuring there's consistency for families, so that we don't see a social worker with suddenly a caseload of 10 over there and a social worker with a caseload of 30. So we move 20 families around. We need to ensure that we get that consistency, but we're certainly moving in the right direction and in terms of that balance of workload for staff.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that before I go on to Councillor David Williams for the next two questions, please? David.
Thank you, Chair. So slightly different focus with each question, but so at 411, you've outlined that the Family Focus and Rapid Response team are seeing a redesign in 2023. So it was really sort of, what positive impact you're seeking to see from that, and, if you like, it's a little bit more of how and why that's happening, I guess. And then there's also been mention about vacant transformation with staff moving into vacant social work posts. So it was also what is happening around recruitment. Does it leave you with a recruitment issue and some gaps? It's trying to understand that. I don't know if I've phrased it very well, but hopefully you get a sense of what we're asking.
Thank you, Councillor. And just if I can start on the recruitment element of the question first. We have had agency staff in Torvine, as many local authorities are. There's a national shortage of social workers, as you'll probably be aware. I think it was 44% of the workforce that Social Care Wales found are in the first 3 years of qualifying now. So if you think of the experience of those social workers through the pandemic, most of them have been operating virtually. The numbers going through universities are really low. So we are seeing a real shortage in the workforce, which has resulted in some local authorities having significantly higher numbers than ourselves of agency staff. I'm pleased to report that whilst we've had up to, I think it's 9 at any one point of agency social work staff, we've been able to recruit 5 new social workers as of this recent month. Those social workers will move into post over the summer. We will then reduce, because some of those agency workers aren't full-time equivalents, we will reduce to 1, if not 0, agency staff by the end of the summer. And what we will have is a transition plan with the agency staff transferring cases back into locality teams, and then the cases then being reallocated by managers across the service. So we shouldn't see an impact by reducing our agency, but obviously we'll see lots of benefit because we're paying less money and we're having consistency for families, which is the most important thing. And in terms of the family focus and rapid response, the aim of that really was to expand that service, because it was there were a number of posts held within there that were social work qualified staff that went through a job evaluation process that identified that those roles could be at a lower grade than the social work role, because it was actually the quality of the work that was being done rather than the grade of the staff member. So what we were able to do was move some of those staff members into vacant social work posts to enable, again, families to get that support, because we had qualified staff within the authority, and we could obviously reduce the use of agency by moving those staff across. But then we were able to expand the service because we had a greater budget then, because the grade that we were introducing was slightly lower than the social work grade. So we've expanded that service from 5 workers to 7 workers. So that's not massive, but it does enable us to potentially have another 20, 30 families receiving that support. So all in all, I think it's gone really positively, Jason. I think it, and we've now recruited those staff. They've all come as staff within local authorities, so within health and education posts within the council. So we've been able to recruit rather than externally. We've recruited it internally. So, you know, we've been able to promote staff who are looking to progress into higher graded roles. So we've been able to recruit our own and support our own. So all in, it's been a positive experience, I think, and hopefully we'll see the benefits of that in the coming months.
I'd say as well, whilst the rapid response and family focused teams as they existed before were very positive, they yielded very positive results. I think what we've done by embedding them within the teams is we've almost taken out a referral process. So there's a quicker response and an immediate response rather than a team having to refer to family focus or a team having to refer to rapid response. We have rapid response, which, as the name suggests, embedded within the MASH team. So if something comes through, they can respond rapidly. There's no need for that referral process to go through. Within the family focus teams being embedded within, our locality teams as well. And it corresponds well to and just really reinforces again that strength-based, that consistency of practice and strength-based practice. So just to add one other thing, in terms of the recruitment, Torvine's always prided itself on our retention of staff. We've got some, I would say this, we've got some really, we've got some hard-working, really hard-working staff who've been here for a hell of a long time and have stayed within Torvine, despite the pressures, that they face day to day. We've always been really good at retaining our staff. There's a piece of work that's taking place at the moment linking into our agency staff, a national piece of work led by ADSS, the Association of Directors of Social Services, looking at the usage of agency staff and trying to control that market as well, and trying to move, there's a significant element of profit within the use of agency staff. An agency member of staff costs us twice as much as a social worker would. So there's a significant piece of work being done through ADSS, looking at how we can control that market better as well.
Your next question?
Okay, slight change of tack. This is moving on to the progress on the residential provision, and I think you've indicated that you said it would. We're going to ask when it's going to open. You said about another 12 months. It really is this going to be able to provide sufficient provision, and we'll be looking to provide provision elsewhere in the borough in the future. Is this a sort of a first stage, I suppose, in things?
Thank you, Councillor. Picking up again on your last point, I think this very much is Torvine testing the water, trying to develop this model. This was done pre my arrival. Jason was very keen to ensure this that Green Hill was the right site in Torvine, enabling our children to come back into Torvine and working in partnership with Melin, and then a provider for the care element to really give us the best opportunity, I think, to be able to test this out with a plan then to look at expanding that going forward.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think within, as Dan's pointed out within the report, we do have a responsibility under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, linked to placement sufficiency and ensuring that, we can provide in-house for our children. This corresponds, and links well within that level of responsibility. As Dan said, it's almost, a test in the water, a toe in the water for that sort of two-bedded placement. Going forward, everything is going to be based, it's going to be based upon that level of need, in terms of how we develop this going forward. As I said, we've got 12 young people who are in residential. I'd suggest of those 12 young people who are in residential, for some of them, there isn't a need for them to be in residential care. It's just that there is nothing else available at the moment because of, how the demand, how the market is currently looking. But there will always be a need for a residential provision. Going forward, it'll be very much, let's see how this works and how this operates, and do we need to expand that as part of an ongoing placement strategy.
Do you else want to come in? Jane, do you want to come in?
Thank you. So you said it's going to open approximately 12 months. And then do you have an idea of how long you'll monitor it before you're able to say, yes, this is a success, or no, we need to tweak certain things before we then move on to open other units?
In terms of the monitoring, this is obviously going to be based upon the outcomes for those children who go through that process, isn't it? I would suggest that, like I said, there is going to be a need for residential. There's always a need for children with complex needs. In terms of the development, I would suggest that there will be further developments going forward with it. The monitoring will be very much pulled within our service specification, how we monitor the effectiveness of that provision, both in terms of outcomes for children and value for money as well. So that will be pulled within the service specification. I couldn't give you a sort of, I guess, a deadline or an outline of how that will look at this stage, but yeah, pulled very much within the service spec for that provision.
Councillor Clarkson, do you want to come in, please?
Yes, please. Just if I could ask briefly, are there any plans or any sort of discussions going on with cross-borough work on the residential aspect of bringing the children back into our local authority areas?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and we should have probably expanded our answers around that. And because the Eliminate agenda, which is cited in the report, is the Welsh Government's expectation that profit is removed from children who are in care. And the driver around that is obviously been from the majority of local authorities to design and build and develop their own children's residential homes. There is already a Gwent Windmill Farm project, which is a joint social care and health model that is based on a site in Gwent that is recently opened, and was 2 years in the planning. I know, because I was involved in some of that at the early outset, and these places don't get registered quickly. They take a lot of work. But absolutely, with the Eliminate agenda, the Welsh Government have provided some additional funding, and 5 regional posts have now been created under the Eliminate agenda to develop further regional approaches. And we've been had some very initial conversations with colleagues who already have established care provision and registered managers for homes both in Caerphilly and in Newport, to consider whether or not we could look at a wider regional model for staffing the homes as everyone develops their own individual homes within the area. So obviously, Regional Partnership Board are very supportive of that approach. We are very keen here to learn from our colleagues and to develop models regionally. And yeah, there's a great will, I think, in Gwent, collaboratively across the strategic directors and heads. It is a very collaborative region, and I think that's in contrast to some, and things get done, I think, which is again really positive. So absolutely, we will progress with our model, but definitely in collaboration and having the support of the others, and we'll learn from each other, I think.
Underpinning this as well, Councillor, is in terms of the development that we are building on within Torfaen, the capital element for that, to develop the property came from the Integrated Care Fund, which is a Welsh Government funding. That's now changed to, it's now called the Regional Integration Fund, again, from Welsh Government, the RIF as we call it, and that money is set up to adopt a regional response. It doesn't just relate to children within residential care, it covers a whole expanse to adults, social care as well. But it's aimed to support us looking at a regional response to some of these issues.
Yeah, it's obviously this flex in the numbers of children that are going to come through the services needing residential. So that would give some flexibility, maybe if within the Gwent area or slightly wider Welsh area, there was some slack with residential placement. So I just wondered from that perspective. Thank you. That was a good answer.
Linda, thank you very much. But I think you've got the next question, which may partly have been answered. But if you want to come in again.
Yeah, it has partly been answered, but maybe we can have a bit more information on it. It's recognising that there's been some time since the original costings were calculated for the Greenhill bungalows, and during that period there's obviously been significant price increases. It's mentioned within the report that rents and charges associated will change. So are there any risks associated with the financing of this provision, or are we pretty secure and sure that these increased costs will be covered?
There are no risks in terms of the capital element of it, because we had significant funding from Welsh Government, and we've entered into a partnership with Melin Homes in terms of the actual physical establishment and the development of the physical establishment. That's not to say, of course, that rental charges will go up annually, regardless of, I guess, the current issues we're facing with inflation and such like. So fees and charges will go up annually. They'll be incorporated, within our annual projection as well. I think where there is a risk, obviously, is as we're developing the property and say we go out to tender for delivery of service. When we initially did the business case 12 months ago, that will look different now. I've no doubt there will be an increase in cost to that, but again, there'll be an increase to cost to that every year, I would suggest. That increase in cost, though, won't be as significant as what we currently pay or what the increase in cost would be within the private sector as well. So even though there will be that potential risk of increasing cost, that risk will never be as significant as the risk if we continue to use the private sector.
That's great. That's very reassuring. Thanks.
Thank you. Alfie, do you want to come in on your question? Question 15, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It mentions in the report and the supplementary about the eliminate agenda of the Welsh Government. If the Welsh Government is trying to eliminate all profit and 80% of provision is currently for profit, how are we going to mitigate the effects of bringing everything in-house and moving to a model where it's not for profit? And what impact will this have looking into the future down the road? Thank you.
I think we have an advantage within Torfaen, as we said, I guess, within one of the previous questions or when we were going through the report, in that we have a low, our proportion of in-house carers versus independent foster carers and versus residential care. Our proportion of in-house is significantly higher. So we have a small number of children in the, I guess, for-profit element of care. I guess how we address it is what we're currently trying to do with the development of Greenhill, with that continued drive within our in-house placements and our in-house recruitment, so that we bring more and more children back into the Torfaen sphere of care. There will always, I think it'd be naive of me to say that there will never be a need for the use of private organisations, and in some instances, organisations that are based upon profit. It'd be naive of me to say that, that will totally be eliminated and eradicated. It won't. But our strategy, our placement strategy going forward is around, ensuring that we have more in-house foster carers, that we have residential placements that we're able to use in-house, and coupled with that, that we are reducing demand as well, you know, and that our looked after population becomes smaller and smaller. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor?
Yes, great, thank you.
Thanks, Alfie. Question 16 has already been answered. Members, questions 17 to 20 have more or less been already considered and been given responses. So can I suggest that we ask one question to condense it all? Are you happy if we do that, please? Linda?
Yeah, through the chair, I just wanted to ask one more question on the special guardianship offer, if possible, and how we've improved that, because that seems to be quite key to some of the plans going forward.
Please do, Linda, and then we'll condense the following questions for Jason and Dan. Okay? Do you want to come in, Linda?
Yeah, it was just that question. How have we improved the guardianship offer? Because that's obviously quite crucial to changing the kinship and the place with parents sort of offers, or court case.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes. Well, certainly for special guardianships, I think previously, historically, family members who cared for their children were, you know, it was agreed that they would have a special guardianship order and off they went. Actually, what local authorities recognise that there were a number of special guardianships that then would break down for whatever reasons, but they usually focused on financial support or practical support and emotional support to those carers. So we have actually developed a specific element of the family placements team now that is a special guardianship order. There are particular workers who work directly on supporting those carers, and our special guardians get the same training as foster carers now. So they have all of the access to that support as well through that element of the team, which is really beneficial and a significant shift for us. Obviously, we've also committed to paying our special guardians the same rate as what foster carers would get on a flat rate. And then there's further work going on at the moment to consider something called a no detriment policy, which would be considering offering the exact equivalent for kinship to transfer over to special guardians. The legislation does inhibit us slightly from Welsh Government because it says special guardians shouldn't be paid for the care of their child. It's to ensure that those carers aren't financially burdened or impacted upon. So there's some challenges around the legislation. We're trying to work effectively around with our colleagues from legal, etc., to look at how we can best support those carers. But I think what we've done is we've recognised some of the reasons why special guardianship wouldn't have been offered in the court process, and we're pushing back on that now. So when the option does come up at the conclusion of care proceedings, there is almost an equivalent offer for people to choose a special guardian order as opposed to being a kinship foster care. Because, of course, a lot of those families don't want their grandchildren in their care under a care order having to come back to the local authority when they want their hair cut or when they want to change dentists or things like that. So they're very keen to work with us to look at this transition over, but what they want, of course, is to make sure that they're not suffering as a result of transferring. So we're working really hard to achieve that, and that will be very much in consultation with those kinship carers as well as we develop our next steps on this programme. But it's an exciting piece of work, I think, and again, you know, there'll be such a benefit for Torfaen in so many ways. So yeah, again, we'll update you on that on the next one.
Yeah, that's really good news to hear, because I've been involved in cases where this has been an issue in the past, and you know, it'd be great to hear more as this develops so that we can see how this is impacting and affecting the services we're offering. Thank you very much for that offer, and thank you, Chair, for letting me bring it in.
Jason, do you want to come in?
So I think there's another component to it as well, Councillor, which is around dealing with this further upstream. So when families are coming through and going through proceedings, I think practice has been such in the past where we didn't have a specialist SGO officer, for example, that it was almost a bit of a fait accompli that these proceedings will result in a care order. So it's sorting out further upstream as well and making sure families are well informed, you know, of what an SGO is, what the benefits particularly of an SGO are, and making sure that, you know, the first order is an SGO, the first order isn't a care order.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds really positive. Thanks for that answer and that information.
Thanks, Linda. I'll just into the next couple of questions into how are we addressing the specific areas for improvement and development set out in the CIW outcome letter.
Thanks once again, Councillor. Yes, I think what certainly came out of that report was lots of positives. I think it was coming in as an interim head of children's services to have that first experience with the inspectors. That I think there was a real keenness from them to learn of the positive changes that had been seen in Torfaen over recent years, and that was highlighted very much within their report, that they'd seen significant shift. And again, they talk of the strength-based practice and seeing that much more supportive approach from social workers towards families, and very much from families when they'd spoken to families and other agencies, how there had been that shift within Torfaen. So I think a lot of the work that they picked up on was about, you know, more to do, build on the positives that you've achieved thus far. And then some of the things that they picked up, particularly around the voice of the child and the consistency of staffing, which I think I certainly honed in on, are the two areas that I thought, yes, okay, I can accept those. Were again, you know, we've got obviously, we've talked about the agency staffing, the consistency, that's mainly the issue that we've seen, and we've now been able to recruit to those posts, so that's a really positive step forward. And I believe the workforce, again, through the team management service development post Jason's and I have both talked about this morning, that post is going to focus on staff recruitment and retention and staff stability. So again, I think we'll have a dedicated resource to supporting staff, which will hopefully mean we keep our staff. And then obviously the other element which they picked up on was voice of the child. And it was something we completely recognised. There's a couple of things I'd like to tell you about there. This report's sadly not long enough to include everything that we've been doing. But what I would say is we're looking at setting up some stakeholder groups, particularly through our corporate parenting panel, where we'd have young peoples who were part of an advisory board for the local authority, and they would actually be our critical friend almost, in that they would be talking to us and evaluating how we're delivering services and providing that direct feedback to really ensure that the child is at the centre of our thinking and that their voices are really captured within how we record, how we design services, how we deliver services, outcomes for children, and likewise, ambitiously, we'd like to do the same for parents going forward. So there's a parents board, so parents are able to feedback and develop and explain to us what their experiences are of children's services. So we get back to that position where we are offering support rather than being seen as a profession that has a negative impact. So very much about, how we embed that voice of the child will be through reviewing our documents, reviewing our policies, reviewing the way that we capture their data and detail through wikis and recordings and assessments and things, but also then using, that stakeholder group as a real critical friend on a quarterly basis to go through, how are we doing? How are we delivering services? What's it like for you? What's your experience of us when we're trying to support you? So I think those are kind of three components that we're really key to take from the letter. I don't know if you had anything else, Jace.
I was just going to say, Councillor, in terms of the vast majority of recommendations or the vast majority of some of the issues that were picked out within the CIW letter, a lot of them I think are underpinned by we found evidence of good practice. However, on occasion, we saw this. So I think it's around, I think there's quite a balanced approach from CIW there. And I think what that point or comes down to is consistency of practice and quality of practice. And again, crucial to that is that new role that we have coming in. I'm placing a lot of eggs or a lot of weight on that individual's shoulders when they come into post. But crucial is that individual ensuring that there's that consistency and that quality of practice. I mean, for me, I was exceptionally pleased when that letter came through, because there will always be areas for development following any inspection, and we always welcome, where they do pick up areas for development, because, it's all about improvement. But yeah, for me, there were a lot of strengths and a lot of real clear evidence of being in the right place, Torfaen being in the right place at the present time and having a real good, strong foundation to build on. Again, like I say, that new post will be crucial to underpinning or addressing some of those, I think, small issues that were highlighted in the CIW letter.
Thank you both. You please know we're coming to the last few questions. Question 21 comes from Councillor Steve Evans. Do you want to come in, Steve, on anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. The question I got is the Wellbeing Objective 2 of our county plan sets out our ambition of encouraging and championing children, young people and families so they can thrive. How are we working corporately and strategically to ensure the objective is achieved?
Thank you, Councillor. I think the county plan is exceptionally well linked up in terms of all the wellbeing objectives that sit within the county plan, and I think there are a number of golden threads that sit throughout the county plan, and again, those wellbeing objectives clearly well joined up. I think what's telling for me, and this isn't removing any of the I guess the importance upon all of the wellbeing objectives, but the first two wellbeing objectives within the county plan, when you look at it, relate to children and young people. Increasing educational attainment in schools, and then as you pointed out, Councillor, that second wellbeing objective around encouraging children and young people to thrive. At a strategic level and a directorate level, the county plan, I think, covers a lot. The programmes, the ongoing programmes within the county plan and the work planned as a result of the county plan covers a great deal. For me, I think as I mentioned earlier, I think that the recent alignment of directorates and the changes within directorates really evidence a strategic approach to every element of the county plan, every wellbeing objective. Again, like I said, the change of directorate of which I sit over, and that alignment of a whole children and family service and a whole children and family structure, to me makes absolutely perfect sense. But it needs to make perfect sense and not be at risk of losing the join-up with the other directorates as well. And I've already mentioned, the Communities Directorate and how the Communities Directorate, sits underneath everything really, and sits underneath particularly, ensuring that families thrive. And, building up communities is around building up strengths. And, doesn't that dovetail nicely into a strength-based practice and a strength-based approach within the county? So real strong strategic drive. I think that's, evidence clearly throughout the county plan, evidenced within the change of directorates, which I think before, when we had 4 directorates, I think the more directorates you have, the more chances there are that directorates will operate in silos to a certain extent. I'm not suggesting that's why, but and I think just that closer join up, 3 strategic directors with very close relationships, a chief executive with a total drive. And a total focus upon that county plan, and a total focus upon how the 3 directorates and the 3 directors impact upon one another's business as well. I think that's crucial to that, like I say, that strategic approach to addressing wellbeing objective 2.
Okay. Hey, Steve, you happy with that?
Yeah, I think the county plan is an exceptional piece of work, and to be interlinked with them golden threads, I think is vitally important. Yeah. But yeah, no, thank you for the answer. It was quite comprehensive with that. Yeah.
David, do you want to come in?
My question was going to be what work is done in terms of Gwent-wide collaboration. I think you've actually answered it, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say if there was anything else you wanted to add. That was all. I think you've answered the question, so don't feel obliged.
All I would say is loads. There's loads of regional work. We've mentioned, I've mentioned the Regional Integration Fund. There's the Regional Partnership Board that exists that oversees a great deal of regional work, not just within children's social care, but within adult social care. Dan is part of a Gwent-wide Head of Children's Services forum that really captures the work of children's services. We've got a regional safeguarding board. There are a number of, I think I could sit here forever and a day, but I'll let Dan jump in, I think.
And all I would say is as well, it extends to nationally as well. The workforce, Jason sits on the workforce development element for ADSS. I sit on the development in relation to unregulated placements, the OWR, operating without registration, AWOX, which is the All Wales Heads of Children. And again, having practiced in England and in Wales, coming back to Wales, it's really obvious is that the integration that's there, that everyone works with it, and we have the ear of Welsh Government. We can have those conversations because of, the closeness in way in which we're working. So some of that's obviously a benefit. There are some challenges when that's up, but there's some definite benefits to that. But I think, again, when you look at Gwent and you talk to other counterparts who work in other regions, they just, they're like, how come you guys are so kind of almost friendly and get on and don't, and we do, obviously, where there's challenge necessary, but actually across the Gwent heads, it's a really, you said when I came in, it's a really supportive environment to try to develop and be innovative within that space. So I think it definitely helps. It's a positive thing.
Okay, Steve, I think you've got the last question.
And like me to have the last question from you lot. Whilst we are closely monitoring the number of children looked after and numbers that are placed with parents and special guardianship numbers, etc., how are we actually monitoring the quality of outcomes for our children and young people?
I think that there are so many answers to give to that. That's not avoiding the question, but I think there's so many answers to give that. Obviously, we're monitoring outcomes through, very simple and basic things. I say very simple and basic things, like outcomes in education, for example, and educational attainment and things like that. So monitoring in that sense. I think the crucial bit to monitoring outcomes for children and young people is actually hearing from them as well. And that's, I think within Torfaen, we are good at doing that. We're good at listening to children. We've still got we can still improve on that and make that better and better and better. But I think it's about hearing, really making sure that we're capturing the voice of the child and the voice of the families as well, and learning from their experiences. Dan's already mentioned, the corporate parenting board. I think we've got 3 children or three young people. Care experienced young people who sit on the corporate parenting board. So really being able to input into strategic direction and corporate parenting visioning based upon their experiences. So the crucial bit for me in terms of monitoring outcomes is listening to children and young people. We have well-being objectives and well-being outcomes within our planning processes for children as well. Similar, I guess, to a certain extent to the county plan, albeit at an operational level, but specific well-being outcomes and achievements for children and families and they're monitored as well. We evaluate ourselves against those well-being outcomes for those children as well. There are individual reviewing processes we have. We are one of very few local authority areas that has an externally commissioned independent reviewing process. A number of local authority areas have that in-house. We commission externally for that. So we have independent chairs within our child protection conferencing processes, independent chairs, they're all independent chairs, but independent chairs that sit outside of Torfaen, independent chairs within our looked after children processes. So we've got that external evaluation as well, and that continued external level of scrutiny and ensuring that we're delivering against the plans that we've set out for children and young people at an operational level.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, the only thing is, the question I wanted to ask, if the outcome isn't what you are after, how quickly can you change it to bring the outcome back to a reasonable level?
Yeah, I think for some then it's about, you know, we're working with children and young people and families, and their needs will change, and it may very well be that the outcomes need to change as well. And that's crucial, you know, to our reviewing processes. You know, every child and young person that's in the looked after sphere, or every child and young person is subject to care and support plan, or is on the child protection register, has a clear plan in place. That plan is continually reviewed as well. You know, it would be naive of me to say, oh, we achieve everything for everybody that comes through our door. We don't. But that's because of the complexity within which we work as well. So where we don't achieve the defined outcome, I think it's crucial for us that we determine why we haven't achieved that defined outcome, and could we have done anything differently? Could we have done anything better? Or do you know, did we set our targets too high, perhaps, as well? You know, for some children and families and who are, you know, dealing with complexities and dealing with adversity. You know, I think, you know, amongst ourselves, we look to change ourselves to certain extents, don't we? Whether it's giving up smoking, giving up alcohol, dieting, whatever it may be. And, you know, very often we don't always achieve the full end result of where we wanted to be. So I think it's important as well that we recognise within children and families the journey they go on, and where they have made achievements and where they have changed, albeit they may be very, very small changes, but then we build and monopolise on those as well.
And I don't know if Jason was looking at me when he was saying dieting then or not, but I am trying, honestly. But I think it's a great question, though, your original question, and it's one of those that, you know, you think, it stops you, doesn't it? You know, we talk so much about the, you know, reducing numbers and getting things right, and then we say, what's the actual impact for the children, isn't it? That's where you're going back to. How do you monitor the outcomes for the children? I think that's exactly what. I think, as Jason says, we learn, you know, but I think when we talked about the stakeholder groups that we're looking to set up, you know, through corporate parenting, the corporate parenting pledges are going to be led by the children. So what most local authorities would do would go away and start writing their corporate parenting strategy, getting a group of people around and having some care experienced children to input into that. What we're doing in Torvine is setting up stakeholder events for young people to come along to tell us what it's like to be in care and what they want. So we're trying it from, you know, we're coming from it in an innovative way to try to get our services designed and led by young people, so they're actually going to tell us what we want. But of course there will be people who don't agree with the decisions that we make as well, and some of that is going to be about, you know, having to explain to young people, you have to come into care, or this has to happen, or you're not ready to go home yet, because, you know, this is what's safe, and we have to make sure that obviously it goes back to that safety as well, doesn't it, from our first position of any decision that we're looking to make. But I think we're very open to kind of challenge and listening and learning and being able to evidence why we make the decisions that we make. And I think, you know, there's some really exciting times to really hear much more of that as we take that forward.
Thank you, Dan. We certainly look forward to hearing on that. You'll be pleased to know that we finished our questioning. We'd like to thank you both for coming to the meeting this morning. Thank you for the excellent work you and the team are doing. We certainly see the improvements, and the report was excellent. And also congratulations on the inspector's report for you. Well, we just can't thank you for the work you're doing. And we know that you were really under a lot of pressure on times, but we are grateful. So if you'd like to want to take your leave and have some freedom, now you're more than welcome. Thanks, Jason. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a really good meeting, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. Excellent meeting. Yeah.
Can I remind you now that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and is still being webcast? I refer now to the scrutiny activity and invite you to offer your recommendations. So I hand you over to Rebecca now to formulate the recommendations amongst us as members.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can draw members' attention to the scrutiny activity. So you'll see the first point there is asking you to assess whether the actions and transformation activity taken to date and the proposed future developments will reduce the number of looked after children in Torfaen, in addition to improving the outcomes for those who are in the looked after system. So can I firstly ask, have you been satisfied by the responses you've received today?
Yes,
that
very
is
much so. Yes, very good.
Thank you. And the second point there is to determine whether the development of a children's residential home in Torfaen will deliver improved outcomes for children with complex needs, while also operating within a more efficient and cost-effective model. So
I think so, yes.
Okay, so
The only reservation I got with that, we've got nothing yet because it's not working. It's not operating. So at the moment, we're only basing it on what's actually being provided and not by the action of the model that's being used. So they would probably need to come back once it's actually working. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're all of that, David. The intention is clear. The intention.
But obviously we would want to know how, first year operation or whatever. Yeah.
I think we welcome the invitation to have a seminar on the new issues, and welcome that the involvement of local members in proceedings in the future. I think that would be really good because we all have needs of contact by residents, and I think that's really good input and a good invitation from the team.
Thank you. Could we? Is it appropriate to ask if there could be case studies in that seminar as well? So I think that is always very useful.
Yes.
Linda, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, that we had some very good answers to the questions that we raised there, and it's evident to me that this is very much the beginning of a process of change, and it's going to be ongoing development. So this is definitely something that should be on a priority to come back to scrutiny at an appropriate time, as Steve has said. When Greenhill bungalows are actually functioning. So it's just a decision really on when that would be. Member seminar is the other essential recommendation in it, so that all of our members are updated on some of these changes. And it's not. I'm trying to think when we had the last member seminar about the changes. Was it just after we had the change of the head of department, or just before? I'm not sure, but there's so much has changed recently, and there's so much relevant that needs to be fed back to all members. A seminar is crucial.
Steve, do you have anything anything else to add on?
No, I'm quite happy with how my questions were answered.
Okay. Is it your legacy hand?
No, I just thought that this one of the big issues that came out of the questioning we've just done is this no further action referrals.
Yeah.
So whether we want to put any recommendation in that around how that's monitored going forward. It seems that Gwent Police are the main referrers there, and it must be very difficult for the on the ground staff, the frontline staff, to get this information about how they're the primary referrers. So whether we need to have a bit more information of that specifically going forward.
Can I raise another question as well, coming on probably what Linda said? There are going to be a new team of social workers and everybody else. So my only concern is, will it affect the performance and the operating of looking after these children, because there may be a bit of a delay or maybe a bit of a slippage in the transfer of cases. And what I don't want to see is a drop in the percentage of positive outcomes. So how would we put that into a wording for recommendation?
I don't think that's so much a recommendation as an observation, because what Jason said, there would be a process that there would not be any breakdown in continual. In continual.
No, what I was looking at the recommendation, there wouldn't be the processes wouldn't suffer because of the changes in personnel. That's what I was looking at.
Is this something that this new post that's to be filled imminently will be looking at? So maybe a recommendation about more information of how that's bedding in?
Yeah, that could be along that line.
From the new practitioner, which will be in post after tomorrow, I suppose, because that's when the interviews are taken. So we'll take on board that, and perhaps Becca can word that in such a way that we will get continual feedback.
The only thing was, I was just thinking it'd be helpful to have something about advised once they've got the sort of stakeholder group set up, because obviously they're talking about a link to corporate parenting, and that will obviously impact on other parts of work like fostering panels. So it's just sort of joining things up really, so that members are advised who are involved in those forums. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Anything that you've picked up on?
Thank you, Chair. No, you've picked up. I only had the 3 points, which was one, the seminar and the training at the multi-agency sessions as well, members. So you've raised that one. There was also the one that Councillor Clarkson raised about the no further action referrals. I noted that one. And then the one that Councillor Williams has just raised as well about the hearing back from the stakeholder groups and the events that they're looking to hold.
Brilliant, yeah. I mean, obviously, you'll include our thanks for the hard work they've done and the excellent report that they've had from the inspector. We're all very pleased with the outcome, and just keep us updated, really, in future progress. Okay? Okay. If we've no further questions, item for the next meeting. So, Rebecca, can you go through the plans?
Thank you, Chair. So normally I'd be summing up for the scrutiny year at this point. And I appreciate you've got annual council, so there may be changes to the membership, but hopefully that will be minimal. You will recall at your December meeting, you scrutinised the community resilience item that Dave Leach brought. And as part of those discussions, he set out to you that they would be developing a community wellbeing strategy. Now, that is forecast to go before Cabinet in July, so he has proposed that he would like, obviously, scrutiny, you to have your say and your involvement in that development. So, obviously, the time was against us, unfortunately, so we did have to schedule that in May, the week after annual council. So, if it's okay with members, you have considered all of the items that you've selected in your basket of items. This community wellbeing strategy is set out in the exec forward plan. As I said, it's gone to Cabinet, and there've been no audit referral. So with members' agreement, are you happy to take that strategy and have your input in that before it goes to Cabinet in the summer?
Yes, I think that would be brilliant. The AGM's coming up, and I may no longer be chair. It might be someone else from our group. But I'd like to thank everybody, all the members who've worked really hard this year. And I think we've achieved an awful lot as a health and scrutiny. And whoever becomes chair next year, I'm sure they'll have the same support. But thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure working with you.
I'll always get you a rocking chair, so you'll be all right.
You might have Councillor Hall, you never know. Thank you, everyone. And I close the meeting now. And all go on to your busy afternoon. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.